The foreign weight. The StG-44 trembles in Jake McNeese's hands like something alive, its cold metal frame foreign against his mud-caked palms as he crouches behind the shattered stone wall of a Dutch farmhouse. 18 hours since their C-47s crossed into enemy airspace for Operation Market Garden, and the ambitious timeline has collapsed into this. 23 scattered paratroopers from Baker Company, cut off from their main force, watching fog roll across the canal crossing that represents their only route back to friendly lines. The German assault rifle, stripped from a dead Waffen-SS sergeant during the chaotic night fighting, carries the distinctive scent of different oil, different powder. Everything about it feels wrong in his grip, from the curved magazine's weight to the selector switch that reads in a language he spent 2 years learning to hate. Yet this captured weapon might be the only thing standing between his men and complete annihilation. McNeese runs his thumb along the magazine's spine, counting rounds by weight and balance. Maybe 20 left, possibly fewer. Behind him, Corporal Chuck Plowder works quietly over Private Liebgott's shoulder wound, using strips torn from a German field dressing, while Sergeant Talbot coordinates the movement of walking wounded toward what they hope is still American-held territory. The narrow bridge spanning the canal represents salvation, but German MG-42 positions on the far bank have turned those 50 yards of wooden planking into a killing ground. Operation Market Garden was supposed to be different, a clean airborne operation with clear objectives and defined timelines. Instead, the 101st Airborne found themselves scattered across flooded Dutch polders, fighting a grinding battle of attrition against seasoned defenders who knew every hedgerow and drainage ditch. McNeese's demolition expertise had become secondary to basic survival, as the Filthy 13 were tasked with covering the withdrawal of a reconnaissance patrol that had pushed too far into enemy territory near Veghel. Lieutenant Peacock, fresh from officer candidate school, assigned to the unit despite having no understanding of their unconventional methods, struggles with a tactical decision that could save or doom them all. He wants to wait for artillery support that might never come, but McNeese can hear the rumble of approaching armor from the east. Panzer engines growing louder through the fog mean they have maybe 30 minutes before this becomes a massacre instead of a fighting withdrawal. The irony cuts deeper than exhaustion. Here stands a man who has spent 2 years perfecting the art of killing Germans, now clutching German engineering that represents everything he was trained to destroy. The StG-44's intermediate cartridge and selective fire capability make it superior to his lost M1 Garand in every measurable way, yet using it feels like a betrayal of something fundamental about his identity as an American paratrooper. McNeese, Kraut Patrol, maybe squad strength, moving up the drainage ditch on our left flank. Talbot's urgent whisper cuts through his moral wrestling. Philosophy becomes irrelevant when faced with muzzle flashes emerging from the pre-dawn gloom. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. The StG-44's selector switch clicks to automatic, with a sound McNeese will remember decades later, a small mechanical decision that changes everything. The first burst surprises him with its manageable recoil and rapid cyclic rate, stitching bullets across the muddy embankment where German infantry had been attempting to flank their position. 3 enemy soldiers drop immediately, but he knows this engagement will draw attention from every position within earshot. The MG-42 on the far side of the canal opens up in response, its distinctive buzzsaw cadence raking the farmhouse walls above their heads. Stone chips and mortar dust rain down as McNeese realizes they have perhaps 60 seconds before the enemy coordinates a concentrated assault on their rapidly shrinking perimeter. The German weapon in his hands empties faster than anticipated, forcing him to scavenge additional ammunition from corpses scattered around the farmhouse courtyard. Private Babe Heffron watches from behind an overturned farm cart, his young face reflecting the same moral confusion that tears at McNeese. "That thing sounds different from our rifles," he whispers, nodding toward the captured assault rifle. "Makes me feel like we're shooting at ourselves." McNeice understands the sentiment. Each reload feels like another step away from his own certainty, each burst from the German weapon a small betrayal of everything he thought he knew about this war. But philosophy dissolves under the immediate pressure of keeping his men alive long enough to reach that bridge. Lieutenant Peacock finally abandons his textbook approach, screaming orders for immediate withdrawal across the canal. The scattered remains of Baker Company begin moving in groups of 3 and 4, using whatever covering fire the squad can muster. McNeice provides suppressive fire against muzzle flashes barely visible through the morning haze, the StG-44's sustained capability allowing him to keep enemy heads down while his comrades sprint across 50 yards of open ground. From his position, Corporal Plowder observes the controlled chaos with growing respect for McNeice's adaptation. The demolition NCO's reputation for breaking rules and improvising solutions had preceded him through every command structure in the European theater. But this morning, Plowder witnesses the practical reality behind the legend. McNeice moves with purpose through the farmhouse ruins, adjusting fields of fire and timing his suppressive bursts to cover each group's desperate dash toward the bridge. The fog begins lifting slightly, revealing the full scope of their tactical nightmare. German positions dot the landscape in a rough semicircle, close enough that McNeice can hear shouted commands in a language he doesn't understand, but recognizes as coordination for a final assault. The abandoned farm equipment scattered across the courtyard provides minimal cover, and their ammunition situation grows more desperate with each passing minute. "Jake," Talbot calls from behind a stone wall. "We got maybe 5 minutes before they rush us all at once. These boys are about shot." McNeice knows Talbot speaks truth. The walking wounded move slowly, and several men show the telltale signs of shock and exhaustion that mark troops pushed beyond their limits. The German assault rifle feels heavier in his hands as he contemplates the mathematics of their situation. Too many enemy positions, too little ammunition, too much open ground between their current position and safety. But surrender never enters his calculations. The Filthy 13 built their reputation on finding solutions when conventional tactics failed. The bridge crossing becomes a nightmare of exposed movement under increasingly accurate fire. McNeice watches through the swirling Dutch fog as Private Heffron stumbles on the wooden planking, a German sniper's bullet catching him in the thigh. The young paratrooper goes down hard, completely exposed to crossfire from both directions, leaving a dark trail across the fog-slicked wood as he attempts to crawl toward cover. The MG-42 adjusts its fire pattern, searching for range and elevation to finish him. McNeice's decision emerges from instinct rather than conscious thought. He breaks cover and sprints toward the bridge, the captured StG-44 providing suppressive fire against barely visible muzzle flashes. German bullets whine past his helmet as he slides into a controlled fall beside Heffron. "Can you move?" McNeice shouts over the intensifying firefight. "Legs pretty torn up, Jake. Don't think I can make it across alone." McNeice slings the assault rifle across his back and hauls Heffron into a fireman's carry. The bridge crossing stretches endlessly under direct fire, every step bringing them closer to safety while bullets probe for their exact location. His boots slip on blood-slicked planking as the machine gun finds their range, chewing splinters from the bridge railing inches from his left elbow. Behind them, Lieutenant Peacock coordinates the final withdrawal with growing desperation. The young officer had entered this operation believing in clear objectives and measured risks, but Operation Market Garden's reality has taught him bitter lessons about the gap between planning and execution. He watches McNeice's rescue attempt with something approaching awe, finally understanding why the Filthy 13's reputation preceded them through every headquarters in the European theater. The final sprint to cover costs McNeice everything in terms of energy and remaining ammunition. He dumps Heffron behind a concrete culvert, and immediately turns back to provide covering fire for the last elements still trapped on the wrong side of the canal. The StG-44's final magazine enables him to suppress two separate German positions, while Talbot and Liebgott make their own desperate crossing. From a supply depot 15 miles behind the lines, Master Sergeant Coleman reviews morning reports with growing concern. Baker Company's failure to report scheduled checkpoints suggests another unit has been cut off by the German counterattacks that have plagued Market Garden since its ambitious beginning. He studies maps marked with red circles indicating missing patrols, and realizes that McNeese's demolition section has become separated from its parent unit during the chaotic night fighting. Coleman knows McNeese's reputation for improvisation and rule-breaking, but he also understands the practical reality of scattered airborne units operating without regular resupply. The demolition NCO's section carries limited ammunition and explosives, depending on rapid link-up with friendly forces for sustainability. Extended isolation means impossible choices between conservation and survival. As the sound of approaching armor grows louder from multiple directions, McNeese strips the empty StG-44 of its remaining components and prepares to abandon the weapon. The German rifle has served its purpose, but carrying enemy equipment during a withdrawal invites deadly misunderstandings with nervous American sentries. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. McNeese lets the empty StG-44 slip from his hands into the dark canal water, watching it disappear with a mixture of relief and unexpected loss. The German assault rifle had felt foreign throughout the engagement, yet its superior firepower had kept his men alive during those crucial minutes of covering fire. Now, moving west toward the distant sound of American artillery, he carries only his sidearm and the weight of decisions that will echo through decades of memory. The fog lifts gradually as they navigate Dutch farm roads marked by the scattered debris of Operation Market Garden's ambitious timeline. Abandoned supply crates dot the landscape, some American, some German, all testament to the chaotic nature of airborne operations, when weather, timing, and enemy resistance converge into something no staff officer anticipated. McNeese's small column moves carefully through this wasteland of miscalculation. Lieutenant Peacock walks beside him now, his uniform torn and muddy from crawling through drainage ditches. The young officer stares at McNeese with something approaching reverence, finally understanding the practical reality behind the Filthy 13's unconventional reputation. "That weapon," Peacock says quietly. "You handled it like you'd trained on German equipment your whole life." "Just a rifle," McNeese responds, but his voice carries undertones of moral complexity that Peacock doesn't yet recognize. "Point it, squeeze the trigger, hope it doesn't jam when you need it most." The simplicity of his words masks the internal battle that has raged throughout the engagement. Using captured enemy weapons represents adaptation and survival, yet it also forces uncomfortable questions about identity, loyalty, and the thin lines that separate one soldier from another in the fog of combat. Behind them, Corporal Plowder supports Private Heffron's weight as they navigate the muddy farm track. Plowder had witnessed the entire bridge rescue with growing respect for McNeese's instinctive leadership. The demolition NCO's reputation for breaking rules and improvising solutions had seemed like dangerous insubordination during training, but this morning's action revealed the practical wisdom behind his unconventional methods. "Sarge," Heffron whispers through gritted teeth. "That Kraut rifle sounded different from ours. Made me wonder what their boys think when they hear our Garans." The observation cuts deeper than intended. McNeese realizes that every weapon carries the distinctive sound signature of its origin. American, German, British, and that soldiers on both sides learn to identify friend from enemy by these audio cues. Using the StG-44 had temporarily erased that distinction, creating moments of confusion that could have proven fatal if German forces had interpreted the weapon's familiar sound as friendly fire. As they approach what appears to be an American checkpoint, McNeice reflects on the morning's moral compromises. The captured assault rifle had saved lives through superior firepower and sustained fire capability, but its use had also forced him to temporarily abandon the clear identification that comes with standard-issue American equipment. In war's brutal calculus, survival sometimes requires adopting the enemy's tools while maintaining your own purpose. The distant rumble of artillery grows louder, suggesting they are moving toward active American positions. Behind them, the fog-shrouded canal crossing fades into memory, but McNeice knows the weight of this morning's choices will follow him long after Operation Market Garden concludes. 30 years later, McNeice sits in his Oklahoma kitchen, coffee growing cold in his hands as the freight train's whistle echoes across the plains. The sound triggers something deeper than memory, a visceral return to that Dutch bridge, the weight of the StG-44, and the moral complexity he has never fully shared with anyone, including the military historians who occasionally call seeking details about Filthy 13 operations. The official after-action report from Operation Market Garden compressed that morning into 3 clean sentences. Baker Company elements successfully withdrew across canal under enemy fire. Casualties light. Mission accomplished. Nothing about the captured German weapon, nothing about the internal battle between survival and identity, nothing about how using enemy equipment had saved American lives while forcing uncomfortable questions about the nature of loyalty and adaptation. What McNeice has never told anyone, not the historians, not his fellow veterans, not even his own family, is how natural the StG-44 had felt after those first few moments of moral resistance. The weapon's balance, its sustained fire capability, its superior engineering had revealed uncomfortable truths about American equipment limitations that contradicted everything he had been taught about technological superiority and the righteousness of his cause. The real secret weighs heavier than any medal or citation. For those crucial minutes during the bridge crossing, Jake McNeice had become tactically indistinguishable from his enemy. Same weapon, same desperation, same willingness to kill to protect the men beside him. The fog of war had temporarily erased the clear moral distinctions that justified everything about their presence in Europe. He remembers the precise moment when the StG-44's magazine ran dry for the final time, how his hands had automatically reached for German ammunition pouches on nearby corpses, how he had performed tactical reloads with enemy equipment as smoothly as with his familiar M1 Garand. The muscle memory had developed within minutes, suggesting that the gap between American and German soldiers might be narrower than propaganda admitted. Master Sergeant Coleman's supply reports from that period tell a different story than the official histories. Ammunition expenditure for McNeice's section showed discrepancies that never quite balanced with standard-issue weapons consumption. Coleman had quietly adjusted the paperwork, understanding that scattered airborne units sometimes acquired materiel through unconventional means, but the records hint at a more complex reality than heroic narratives typically acknowledge. The moral turning point had come not during the fighting, but afterward, when McNeice watched the captured rifle disappear into canal water. Relief mixed with unexpected loss. The weapon had served faithfully, had saved American lives, had performed exactly as designed regardless of its origin. Abandoning it felt like betraying a temporary alliance forged in desperation and sustained by necessity. Private Heffron, recovered from his wounds and living now in Pennsylvania, still sends Christmas cards but has never asked about specific details from that morning. Some silences between veterans carry more weight than conversation, representing shared understanding of experiences that resist clean narrative. The young paratrooper's observation about weapon sounds How German rifles made him wonder about enemy soldiers' thoughts had touched something McNeice preferred to leave unexamined. The freight train fades into distance, leaving behind the familiar quiet of Oklahoma morning. McNeice finishes his cold coffee and prepares for another day, carrying the knowledge that heroism and moral compromise sometimes occupy the same moment, that survival can require temporarily becoming what you fight against, and that the most important truths about war often disappear with the weapons into dark water. The phone rings just after dawn, breaking McNeice's morning routine of coffee and careful silence. A young voice introduces himself as a graduate student researching airborne operations during Market Garden, seeking details about the Filthy 13's role in covering Baker Company's withdrawal near Veghel. The questions follow predictable patterns: casualty counts, tactical innovations, leadership decisions, but carefully avoid the moral complexity that transforms clean military history into lived human experience. "Sir?" the student asks with academic earnestness. "The after-action reports mention improvised tactics during the canal crossing. Can you elaborate on specific innovations that contributed to mission success?" McNeice pauses, considering how to answer. The official record speaks of adaptation and resourcefulness, but omits the weight of using enemy weapons, the temporary erasure of clear identity distinctions, and the uncomfortable realization that survival sometimes requires abandoning the moral certainties that justify everything else. How do you explain to someone born decades after the war that heroism and betrayal can occupy the same moment? "We used what worked," he finally responds. "When your regular gear isn't enough, you improvise." That's what paratroopers do. The response satisfies academic requirements while preserving the silence that protects deeper truths. After the call ends, McNeice returns to his kitchen and the familiar ritual of remembering without quite admitting what he remembers most clearly. Lieutenant Peacock, now a retired colonel living in Virginia, maintains correspondence with several Filthy 13 veterans, but has never directly addressed the moral questions raised by that morning's improvisation. His own military career advanced through conventional channels, built upon lessons learned from observing McNeice's unconventional methods, yet he has never publicly acknowledged how close survival came to requiring complete abandonment of regulatory frameworks. The final twist emerges not from dramatic revelation, but from quiet accumulation of understanding. McNeice realizes that every veteran carries similar silences. Moments when survival demanded choices that resist heroic narrative, when the gap between official history and lived experience grows too wide for comfortable bridging. The weight of the StG 44 in his hands represents something larger than captured enemy equipment. It symbolizes the moral complexity that accompanies any honest examination of warfare's human cost. Corporal Plowder died in a construction accident 15 years after the war, taking with him first-hand memories of McNeice's tactical adaptations during the canal crossing. His widow donated his papers to a military museum, including a brief journal entry that mentions Jake's practical approach to equipment procurement under fire, without elaborating on specific details. Some truths survive only in euphemism and careful omission. The freight train returns each morning, its whistle carrying McNeice back to that Dutch bridge where identity and necessity intersected in ways that resist clean resolution. The captured German rifle saved American lives while forcing uncomfortable questions about the nature of loyalty, adaptation, and the thin lines that separate soldiers from their enemies in war's grinding confusion. He keeps no souvenirs from that morning. No photographs, no captured equipment, no tangible reminders of choices made in desperation and sustained by necessity. The memory itself provides sufficient weight, carrying forward the knowledge that behind every medal and mission report stands a human being wrestling with moral complexity that academic histories rarely acknowledge. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report, there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see. Subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.